let's stay in the trenches. Let's talk that defensive line, because in my opinion, this is where we find out whether we're an like a 9-win team, or we hit the under. There's just not enough depth for me. We're counting on a lot of things to go right, in particular with Dexter. I want to be confident. I want to be excited. And for the most part, I am, but more so because I truly believe the other two units on the defensive side are really, really strong. You have Sweat. And then what else you got? Q, you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, you'll be hard pressed to find someone who is a bigger Javon Dexter fan than I am. Loved him since I turned on his Florida tape last year, and I was one of the only guys who was pounding the table for him in the draft community of like, it's all fixable. It was, I felt crazy. But that being said, he is still raw. There is still a lot for him to figure out, and there's a lot of expectation being put on his shoulders. He might be able to carry it, but generally you wouldn't want to rely on that,
right?
Which is concerning when you really only have 3 NFL defensive tackles on your entire roster, right? Between Billings, Dexter, and Pickens being a guy who, too, very similar to Dexter in that, he showed less as a rookie, I thought. I think that he has some more higher floor, I guess would be a way to put it. His hand usage is fairly advanced. Like he does a really good job of with that length. He has long arms for a defensive tackle. He pairs that with good quick hands that get into blockers quickly. The aggression isn't the same as Dexter though. Like that's where that's where it starts to even out. Like Pickens is a little more technically sound with the way that he takes on blocks and the way that he reads stuff out, while Dexter just brings the pure violence that I value very highly, and that I think is a trait that is hard to teach someone. So I think both guys have their upside, have their reasons to be excited about, but I'm not sure that I love relying on either of them to be your full-time starter next to Andrew Billings, especially when you think about Andrew Billings being a guy who, realistically, do you really want him playing more than 40% of the snaps? At, I think he's only listed at 310, but I think it's safe to say he's probably about 340, 350 out there. He can bring some pass rush juice. He can push a pocket, but he's not really the guy you want on passing downs either. So you limit his snaps a little there. I look at this D tackle room. I see one injury away from real problems.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. There's not another position group on this team that is almost like as frail from having just a disaster of a season as that defensive line, in particular the defensive tackle. I mean, if Sweat goes down, just speaking of the line as a whole, then all of a sudden we're in really deep trouble. Then we're putting a lot of pressure on those linebackers. We're putting a lot of pressure on those cornerbacks because I don't know who else is going to get to the quarterback on that level.
I mean, I will say I think I'm a little higher on Demarcus Walker than some people. Like I do like a lot of what I saw from him last year, especially after the Sweat trade. But before the Sweat trade, it's kind of limited. In Demarcus Walker, you have a hefty defensive end or a light defensive tackle who's going to play through offensive tackles, which you can do. I mean, heck, we even saw Javon Dexter play out at the edge sometimes last year and win. We saw him beat Penny Sewell at one point on the edge, because he can play through them. Offensive tackles tend to be a little lighter, a little more finesse style players. If you can get some nice raw power out there on the edge on pass rush downs, they can out leverage them, outpower them, and win. But it's not as consistent a winner. It's not a fast winner, right? It takes time to do that. It's not the same as a guy who can bend around the edge and just get there, or a guy who can make up, half a foot of ground because he has freakishly long arms like Montez Sweat. But these guys are aliens on the edge. So outside of Sweat there and Demarcus Walker, you got Jacob Martin, who I like as a pass rusher. He's a pass rush specialist, a guy who he probably played like 20% of snaps last year. He can't really play rundowns. That's the thing with him. He's like 240 pounds, looks a little lighter than that, if I'm being honest, on tape. I'm not sure you want to ask him to play anything head on the tackle or in, which means that he's a wide 9 guy only. That becomes a big liability against the run. Like on running downs, if you're playing with a wide 9 technique, you got to take the nickel off the field and bring Jack Sanborn in to fill that lane, because Jacob Martin ain't doing it. And then all of a sudden you run into all sorts of matchup issues out there.
Before we move on, I do got to selfishly ask you, does Keith Randolph make this team?
if they can't find someone to pick up, someone who gets released by another team, a defensive tackle, I think he has to.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think you have much of a choice. I think you need to put Keith Randolph on this team. I liked some stuff from him pre-draft. I had some concerns about. I always felt like I wanted to see a little more playing next to Johnny Newton because Newton was getting so much attention. But there was some stuff to like. So some of that body pliability, some of the flexibility he showed out there, and some of his ability to kind of two gap at the college level. I don't think he'll be two gapping at the NFL level, but he did show some good awareness, some good reads at the D tackle spot that you do like to see, and seems like a smart football player out there.